All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Colette Bird, and I'm the project manager that worked on T-Rex, Transportation Relay Exercise of 2019. I brought along with me our Exercise Deputy Director, Corey Portner, and he will go ahead and get us started off.
All righty. Good morning, everyone. Corey Portner, I was previously with the Office of Emergency Preparedness and Response. You can now find me up in the Center for Public Affairs, still hanging out with the preparedness world, doing a lot of communications for them. But in the 2 years leading up to T-Rex, I was actually, Deputy Director for the exercise as well as the Medical Countermeasures Coordinator. So worked very closely with a lot of different folks across the agency to make this happen. So connecting the Transportation Relay Exercise, or T-Rex, to our measures that we have, first and foremost, protecting everyone in Washington. With this, we're really looking at a model to rapidly distribute medication during a communicable disease emergency. In this case, we chose pneumonic plague. That was a little bit of a half step to doing something that was more communicable than anthrax. You might not know this, but for the last 20 years, the prime scenario for emergency preparedness and response has been anthrax. Right, kind of goofy, since we've had pan flu since then. So we wanted to lean forward, given that we have a renewed focus on pandemic influenza moving into this current year, starting July 1, actually, and picked pneumonic plague to kind of get us there. It also allowed us to really focus on a really terrible scenario. Pneumonic plague's pretty nasty stuff. It gives us about 24 hours to get life-saving antibiotics out statewide. So in this case, we needed to really look at improving on where we were in our last distribution exercise, which was called APEX, and that occurred in 2014, as well as renew some interest with partners, in particular, the 6 largest healthcare systems in Washington State. So we spent time working on that and identifying contracts, or at least conversations. We were able to get pretty far with all 6 of them, and then Multi-Care on the east side went ahead and split off, so it's now 7. It's kind of handy. And we also developed a policy playbook around medical countermeasures that was used by the executive leadership team during a tabletop that led up to the exercise itself, the big one, T-Rex. And finally, although Sue will get to this in her presentation, we also looked at expanding our non-DOH presence for folks that were able to join the Receive, Stage, and Store Task Force. So this team actually gets the material from the federal government, the antibiotics, the medical resources, and gets them out the door to our partners at local health and, well, everybody else in between. And so for that, we're able to get 25 new correction industries employees on the RSS team, which is pretty neat. Of course, these folks are all professional warehouse workers, so you can imagine how fast they are. Very nice. Next up, we have work-life balance and really looking at increasing the resiliency to support our responders. And for this, it's, of course, lined out in our support our agency responders work that's been ongoing across the agency for a while now. But we look to actually, within T-Rex, conduct a finance admin exercise. So this is a requirement from the CDC and HHS for our preparedness stuff. But we look to be able to compensate staff for hours worked outside of their normal business hours or outside of that 6 a.m., 6 p.m. We're able to do so. And we're able to provide food to DOH responders during emergencies. Now, this is something that we got pretty far lining out during 2 different opportunities to deal with measles this last year, but we were able to get food to the folks and ensure that all the people working pretty long days, some of them 16 plus hours, were well fed and had a lot of energy to be on the warehouse floor and doing what they needed to do. So down at the bottom, you'll see our 1:30 a.m. IMT crew, so the incident management team there. You see Ken Liasato makes an appearance. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see some of our folks at the Spokane location, which we'll get into later.
All right. So the main issue that we were addressing during our exercise was how do we leverage partnerships to get medications out to the affected populations in the event of an emergency. So this is really how do we utilize the relationships that are already in place. How do we reinvigorate in relationships that we may have had in the past? and how do we create new ones to use in this exercise and in the future. So with that, we really reached out to our tribal governments. We were able to get 15 of the 29 tribes to participate in our exercise, which was amazing. We had tribes even signing up for the exercise in the days leading up too. So I can only imagine going forward with continued work and really opening those lines of communications with them, that we would be able to get all 29 in our next exercise, in our next full-scale exercise. Also utilizing our local health jurisdictions and reinvigorating our relationships with our sister agencies like Department of Enterprise Services to do all of the recovery actually for the exercise and bringing back materials that we had shipped out to our local health jurisdictions and our tribes. We also were able to affect a new relationship with Department of Transportation Aviation to carry out 3 air missions during this exercise. And this is one that really touches on this issue on how do we get to populations that are in more rural areas, people that are in areas that are inaccessible on any regular day. So the San Juan Islands, you know, you can't get there by car, you have to take a ferry over. And on a regular day, you have to do that. On a day of an emergency, there might be down power lines, there might be, say, a mudslide that's covering roads, making roads that are normally accessible inaccessible. So being able to practice that area of delivery that we had not done before in this exercise was a key player in seeing just how broad we can reach with our deliveries in this exercise. Also, we were able to, as Corey was mentioning, really work with our healthcare partners that we haven't normally been able to work with. We held a tabletop with them back in April called the Healthcare Activation Response Tabletop. And that really gave them the area to talk about what it looks like for them as healthcare systems, our partners at the local level, our tribal partners as well as us at the state, how we would all work together to really come together and be able to respond to an emergency such as the one that we were practicing in T-Rex. We also were able to get some things moving with private sector and pharmaceutical corporations, though we didn't actually use them on the day of the exercise. So all in all, we really were able to successfully figure out how we use our partners and how we are able to reach out and create new partnerships and reinvigorate old ones that we also had prior. All right, so how are we doing? How do we reach remote populations, which I just touched on with our air missions? We are able to complete 3 air missions out to Omak, San Juan, and Quileute. Those were all done with great success. And these points here are pulled from our leader's intent, which was written up at the beginning of the planning for this. So this is really touches on how we get the medical material from the CDC when we make that request, get it to our warehouses, and then get it out to people within that given time frame. So one of the key factors here was that we were able to get a secondary RSS, which is our receive, stage, and store warehouse location. We were able to get a second one validated through the CDC, and that is through one of the partnerships that we created with the correctional industries. So we were able to actually use their warehousing and their workers on the day of the exercise, and also have that available to us in any future real life events or exercise events that we may have. And that's really amazing because it now gives us our DOH warehouse. It also gives us their warehouse, and they're all pretty closely located. So if for any reason we were to need to activate both locations, but also just the fact that we have them and their expertise in that day-to-day warehousing work, we're able to get things done super fast in coordination with our RSS task force as well. So that second point there also goes along with the productive partnerships and a diverse array of organizations. And let's see here. Down to the fourth point down, our RSS team being fully rostered. So we were able to actually hold several drills and trainings throughout the planning of T-REX. We were able to actually have the CDC come out and give us a training on pallet jacks and get our RSS team certified to actually operate the pallet jacks, which is definitely handy in the delivery and distribution. They can unload trucks, they can move pallets around safely in the warehouse and get it loaded into trucks, cars, and any other modes of transportation. And then that, I guess I went backwards here, sorry, but that last point was getting the RSS facilities designated, tested, and deemed appropriate for the mission. So that was a really big factor in getting that correctional industries warehouse validated for us so that we have that as a bigger space. They're able to have more trucks at one time than our location, which can only hold, what, 2, I believe. So, yep. That's it.
All righty. So, you want to thank? All righty. T-REX, of course, was conducted May 6th through 9th. You might be surprised. There's a lot of action on May 6th. That was a very early Monday. But as Khalid had mentioned, we actually had to recover these durable materials. So it was known as the Eagle package. We shared it with our regional partners here out in what CDC refers to as Region 10. So we had Idaho and Oregon also using the same supplies. So we needed to make sure that not only did we use it, we had to go pick it up because other folks were using it as well. We also supported the storage of that during everyone else's exercise because we have all these nice fancy warehouses we get to use, but they don't. So that was kind of cool. The next deal there is making sure that we pursue relationships with those private corporations, healthcare systems, and other state agencies. As Khalid had mentioned, private corporations are a pretty tricky one. Our relationship as a state agency with, say, a corporation like Amazon or Walmart or what have you, can be difficult to start up. It always is nice to have a warm introduction. And so we were able to actually move the needle quite a bit for being able to have relationships with a few major employers in the state, as well as support local health jurisdictions who are also working with these companies that are within their county areas. So from there, healthcare systems moved very far. We were able to have several healthcare systems actually participate day of the exercise. So as far as getting these antibiotics and other materials out to the folks who need them most, you might imagine that hospitals are probably one of the locations we'd want to get to, as well as clinics and, of course, even pharmacy locations. And so with that, a few of the partnerships we were able to secure actually ensured that over 750,000 people would be able to be taken care of as part of just one of the 6 largest healthcare systems patient networks. So pretty neat. And then, of course, state agencies and other state agencies. Khalid mentioned corrections as a great partner for being able to receive the materials, DOT Aviation. We also had participation from the Washington State Patrol. They provide our primary form of security. So we had over 25 different state patrol officers out at the various warehouses we have here in the state, which was pretty fun. They had a good time. And we got to test a couple of our security assumptions for really getting these materials, keeping them secure, and getting them out the door without too much of a hassle. As you might expect, we operate a good deal of our security through obscurity. So, what's a big white van driving down the road versus another big white van? But having the State Patrol involved is always handy in case there was something more urgent. I will note, during measles round 1, I'll call it that, but during the Clark County response, the conversations that we had with the Washington State Patrol leading up to T-REX actually came in handy at about 8 o'clock at night when we needed to get a blood product from Seattle, from one of the healthcare systems we were working with, and through one of the pharmacy associations we were working with, down to Clark County urgently. That call was made and only made because we knew the right person to talk to at that time through our incident management team. So it's pretty neat to be able to take something that we were building for an exercise and, pull it out a little bit early and get it happening. So that was pretty neat to see, and something that really gave us a lot of motivation to continue this work. And then finally, conducting tabletop exercises. So for those of you who don't know, this is really getting everybody together to walk through their assumptions, their plans, and kind of working through a scenario. We did a number of those. Actually, I think I counted over 40 in 2 years, which is a considerable number. From there, we do drills. So we actually put a time test to folks, making sure that they can do the operations in the necessary amount of time that we give them. And then finally, training for both our own folks as well as our partners, and offering some pretty extensive training opportunities and bringing trainings that are not regularly offered out to Washington for both our folks as well as our partners and even other agencies that work with us. So from there, what are we doing to improve? Well, with the lessons learned from T-REX, we take these and we incorporate them into updating our plans and our procedures. Obviously, we're always learning new things, and we want to capture that knowledge. And then we also want to continue the training plan for our response teams. So we got a whole lot of new people involved, and we also want to get, to a point where they are fully rostered and ready to roll. The idea is to make sure that these teams are able to respond at any minute, because as you might expect, emergencies don't usually happen when it's convenient. So we'll continue doing that. And moving to barriers and challenges. So one of the barriers and challenges that we experienced during the build-up to T-REX 2019 and in learning it is really continued support across the agency to staff our operations teams. These include things like the incident management team that you might be aware of, as well as various strike teams and task forces. For T-REX and the build-up to a medical countermeasures exercise, we were very involved with the Receive, Stage, and Store Task Force, one of the oldest teams here at DOH, as well as the Medical Countermeasure Strike Team, the newest here at DOH. So getting those teams off the ground and kind of for the RSS team, we had over 60% new team members. So those are new DOH staff. With that, ensuring that we continue those recruitments, but also capture some of the institutional knowledge. Number of folks on that team in the 2 years that we worked on T-REX actually retired. And so capturing their experience and their skill, and in particularly when it comes to some large-scale responses, namely the fact that H1N1 was just about 10 years ago now, was something that we needed to kind of prioritize time of, and making sure that we had those cross-training opportunities. The next is, and Colin had mentioned it as well, we don't have concurrent RSS warehouses in the state. This is something that's unique to only a few, only a few states in the entire country. You can probably think of a short list of who would need those: Texas, California, New York, and Washington. So we have this giant string of volcanoes that just kind of go right down the middle of the state, and we communicated that to our federal partners, and they were appreciative of the fact that if we went through with having 2 RSS warehouses operating concurrently, not only did we save about 10 hours on our delivery times for the east side, but we also ensured that we cut costs across both our agency as well as the federal agencies involved in this at HHS and at CDC. So it was pretty neat to get kind of a test run for, and it's something that we've actually got a good amount of attention from some of our other regional partners who have some similar concerns, right? Alaska being one of the ones I was surprised didn't have concurrent operations. So kind of leading the way there. Next up, we have, of course, needing contacts and fluid relationships with these healthcare systems and pharmaceutical distributors. Of course, there's turnover everywhere. One of the things that we experienced pretty heavily in the build-up to T-REX was just a lot of different names and faces moving through our private partnerships. And so with that, making sure that we really invest in our partnerships with some of the professional associations we have. One of them that was very handy was the Washington State Pharmacy Association, to kind of coordinate the who's who and get folks into the room together. And then next up, really leveraging all of the different subject matter expertise and partnerships that we have here at the Department of Health, and folks who work with healthcare systems, every day, and kind of keeping up with those conversations. With that, one of our main focuses leading up to this exercise and in continuation, both for us here in Washington State and nationally, comes down to pharmaceutical distribution during a medical countermeasures event. So in most cases, who will receive these drugs from is probably like a McKesson or a Cardinal, one of those large pharmaceutical companies. They do it every day, and they'll probably do it during an emergency too. And so we're really continuing those conversations. We had hopes to work with McKesson during this exercise. However, construction on their warehouse that they had just recently finished, actually the other week, in Renton didn't complete in time. So missed out on that opportunity, but we've continued conversations. I know this is one of the things that EPR's keeping a close eye on. And then finally, tribal relationships and participation in activities, particularly preparedness activities. So we had, I think at least for an exercise owned by Department of Health of this size, the most tribes that we've ever had before, and looking at it, 15, which was pretty cool. We'd obviously want to increase that to just about everybody, one more merrier, but including the, our folks from tribal governments in the exercise design, I think is something that can be pretty difficult given travel budgets and availabilities. So increasing opportunities for folks to tune in remotely, I think, was something that really came together as the exercise planning continued. And while we were building up to T-REX, we also conducted the DOH American Indian Health Commission cross-jurisdictional collaboration project. Pretty cool way to bring folks all into the room together. We did a training on medical countermeasures one day. About a month or so later, we would come in and do a tabletop. We were able to get, I believe, over 26 or 27 of our federally recognized tribes in Washington State participating in those. What it really comes down to is not only that, but then building off of that and getting folks into the room for our designing meetings so that we can incorporate everybody's considerations. Yeah, absolutely. And getting out to where folks are at, meeting them where they're at, and making sure that we give opportunities for folks to be involved. And I think that would be excellent. So that work all continues. T-REX happened, it didn't end, it just continues building. So expect to see more. And go back real quick. Just set your calendars for about like August 2024. These happen every 5 years. Some of the other accomplishments, and we can kind of share these a little bit. T-REX was a multi-layered, multimodal distribution model. There is no other state in the country, no other location in the world that I think uses the same setup that we do. We tested a lot of really interesting, nerdy logistics things, and every single one of them paid off, which blew my mind.
No one else had used the air missions model either. So that was a first for our state, and I think a first for maybe even that design.
Yeah. Alaska gets pretty close. They heavily use their National Guard. The other deal we had was a pickup option. So this might seem kind of silly. Probably do this a lot if you swing by Walgreens to grab your meds or something. But going to the source. So we actually offered this. We piloted this first with our tribal partners who were playing, and then offered it to local health jurisdictions as well to actually drive up to our warehouse locations and pick up the medical material right there. And for some of these folks, this is like a shoebox size amount of medication to cover 25% of their service population. So it's pretty reasonable as opposed to having it be the last stage of a, daisy chain delivery across the state.
Yeah.
Had some pretty big successes there. Oh yeah, and time-wise, cut off a significant amount of hours.
Well, yeah, and we performed it start to finish in about 15 hours of the 36 that we had allotted. And again, touching on what Corey was just talking about of tribes and local health jurisdictions actually coming to us, on the deliveries, the closest is actually the last stop. So you go out to the furthest location and then you drop off all the way back to the nearest stop that it would be. So since we're working on a time frame, it doesn't make sense or won't save as many lives if you have the option to come pick up and you're able to, and you have clear roads and everything. It's often faster for them to just come to our warehouse and actually pick up. And we had 3 pickups, I think we did. And they all went really well. I got great feedback from each of those people that did come and pick up. And again, if they don't have a large load either, they can just come in their car. Any of their their company cars, like their local or state cars, or their tribal vehicles, they can come, and pickup trucks, even just a four-door sedan if it's just a few boxes. So that worked out really well, and that showed us that not only do we have the outward distribution, but we have people that are able to help and come pick up and speed up the process even more.
Yep. All right, questions, and me cheesing up there. What were your experiences with T-Rex? I'm interested in that. I know there's at least a few faces who were activated during it. Over there in particular, a couple others. You got a question?
Or I think Sue has one real quick.
For me, it was a great opportunity to start something in the middle of the night and then see it move forward when the next IMT shift came on, and just see the difference of how the next IMT picked things up, and new blood in the room. It was nice to have some folks that were a little more awake, but it was very nice to have the new incident commander come on board and say, okay, so in this particular scenario, this is what we would be doing as an IMT. This is what we need to be prepared for. These are the questions we need to be asking and answering for executive leadership. And the rest of us at 1:30 in the morning, I think we were just, filling the seats, but that was really a great learning experience for me personally, to come in and see, okay, this is what this means to the response.
Great, thank you, Sue. Does anyone else have anything to add?
For the exercise, I really appreciated how the agency came together, even in solving like the finance admin, what we now know was an exercise, but figuring out some of those processes was really helpful. And I really appreciated the support from across the agency.
Ditto. Thank you, Kenley. Is there anything from online? Okay. So I just have a quick question on how many people actually knew T-Rex was going to happen or was happening on the day of? Awesome. Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Good news, it happened.
Yeah, good news, it happened. We're all still alive. Okay. How did you guys find out about T-Rex? Was it in the weeks leading up to, or had you known about it for a while? Did anyone else here actually participate in T-Rex?
I think I heard about it in conversations leading up to the event, maybe 6 months or even longer in advance. But then also in the Daily Dose, there were articles leading up to it. There were signs in the bathrooms to stall talk. You got a captive audience there, right? So pick some information up there.
Did anyone see a dancing dinosaur in the Daily Dose? Yeah, I think that helped us.
Yeah. It may have been Kenley. We've never seen them both in the same room. Okay, thank you for that feedback. I just want to know, because going forward, I think that that's another area that we can focus on, is really getting people aware of the exercise, because we can get so in a vacuum of planning that we know about it, of course, and we know what's going on, so we just assume that, well, everyone knows this. But just really reaching out so that you are able to participate if you want, and that we know the best mode to get this information out to you. So thank you, everyone, for your attention and time. We are all done.